Welcome everybody. My name is Ben Roski. I'm a senior security consultant with BT Professional Services. Been in the security space for a while. Write some articles, speak at some conferences, and came out a few years ago with this book, 20 Things Every Employee Should Know, published from McGraw-Hill. As I said, I work for BT Professional Services division of British Telecom. Got a large presence in North America. Here's what we do. We get some information there. Specifically from the security space, we do pretty much full coverage from security operations, policy, design, architecture, highly rated from the NSA, and organized companies in a lot of different areas. So our agenda for today is going to give you an overview of social networks. I'm going to talk about the security issues and focus most of this webcast on what organizations and individuals can do to ensure that they can use social networks in an effective manner without getting caught up in the security and privacy problems that are pervasive within social networks. We'll leave some time for questions and answers. And this is a focus on real-world strategic solutions. I'm not going to focus on hardware, software, appliance solutions. There are a number of them out there, and they do a decent job. But I think it's important for organizations to focus on how they're going to deal with social networks and information security rather than just making the mistake of going out there and buying an appliance. And we will see, even if you've got a great product which you're able to procure, that is only going to help you to a limited degree. So social networking has changed a lot since the 1990s. Using CA as an example, in the early 90s, Charles Wang from CA had an email system, and he limited usage. Employees could use it an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. His focus was to emphasize face-to-face interaction, have his people deal directly with their clients. You jump to 2009, the folks at CA have 7x24-hour BlackBerry access, and now they're on Twitter. So you can see just how the dynamics have changed significantly. Social networks are huge. They're getting larger. A report from Forrester says now 75% of adults in the U.S. Use social networking tools or have some presence on a social networking site. This is up from 56% in 2007. And if you look at the numbers, they're staggering. Here's a Twitter feed from CNN Breaking News. They've got 2 million followers. Oprah, 2 million also. If you look at the dynamics of YouTube, these folks posted a video of their wedding. They expected maybe 100, 200, 300 people to view that. As of last week, it's been viewed by 16 million people. So you can see the power of social networks. In the past, if you'd ask someone in media, tell me something that had over 100 million viewers. They think the Academy Awards, Super Bowl, World Series. Here's a video of two kids from England. Well over 100 million people have seen that. So the social networks is just staggering with its power. And now we're seeing the President of the United States has a presence on Facebook. So the social networks are massive. There's a tremendous wave out there. Joshua Ross has this taxonomy. He's calling it the social web, and we're seeing how social networks are changing dramatically the face of IT and the face of how we live and how we interact with people significantly. He calls this thing the social web about communities, collaboration. You see business reputations are defined by customer opinions and ratings. We'll talk about reputation management later. Press is delivered by bloggers. The printed media has been devastated by social media. Many newspapers have been existent for 100 years. We found they've gone belly up in the last 24 months. Product development now is tremendously driven by customers, and a lot of folks who are growing up in this environment expect to take that with them when they're in the workplace. And so this is a powerful force that organizations need to deal with. So here's a Here's a cartoon I found on the net. Unfortunately, I don't know who to attribute it to, but you can see, how people are dealing, with social media. The idea of people using Twitter for feeds of what they're doing a number of years ago. People couldn't understand, why we would do that, and now it's a tremendous force. And even this Webcast opened up with a hashtag about the specific Twitter feed. You can't fight social media. Social networks are not a fad. There are people who are using MySpace and Facebook for silly reasons, but as a whole, it's tremendously powerful, and the business community has embraced it significantly. Organizations need to prepare a strategy. They have to have a realistic understanding of how they're going to use social networks, understand the risks, the benefits, and more importantly, these are unique challenges that social networks bring into the workplace. And organizations need to understand that, and they need to deal with that. Here's just a number of social networks which are in the millions of users. Here's the list. If we come back in 6 months, we'll see this list has changed significantly. For whether it's Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, these are communities out there with tens, hundreds of millions of users. Organizations are embracing these, but they can't completely embrace them with open arms. They have to understand the risks and how they need to deal with them. Social networks are big-time news stories. Last year, Twitter was hit by a denial of service attack. This was reported live on CNN, on Fox News. These are major breaking stories. Yesterday, Gmail was out for about 90 minutes. Every major news organization had something about it. So we're saying, social networks are big. As I said, they are not a fad. But on the other side, there's a lot of tremendous benefits, social benefits, media benefits, business benefits. But with that, there are significant risks. And here's some headlines, some news stories from the past few months I just collected, which really underscore the problems and the issues with social networks. There's a lot of data leakage. There's people posting proprietary information that they shouldn't. There's people using it for salami attacks. There's business intelligence uses that have gone awry. People are stalking people. There's defamation, libel. Spies are using it. And we'll see how it's becoming a tremendous tool. But on the other side, like anything, it can be used for the wrong purposes. And if people don't understand how to effectively use social networks, they will put themselves at risk. They will put their organizations at risk. Ultimately, we've seen divorce. We've seen people fired from their positions. We've seen suicides. So there's a lot of great things out there. But ultimately, people and organizations need to understand how to do that responsibly and in a secure manner to ensure security and privacy. As I said, these are headlines from the last 90 days. And every day, if you do a search on Google News, you'll see there's news stories about significant security issues, significant privacy issues around social media. And the organizations that are finding themselves victim to these attacks often have not put in the effort in order to mitigate those risks. So from an information security perspective, social networks are a major game changer. First off, this whole thing called social networks is relatively new. So a lot of organizations are struggling, to understand, to deal with it. How should they deal with it? What is the right approach to social networks? It's flipping traditional information security, in a 180. Information security in the past often was dealt with from a framework of infrastructure protection. They had their physical site, or they had the remote site, and they will use tools like firewalls, switches, and other ways to secure that perimeter. So we have our corporate database, our corporate information stores, and we will secure that deep within the perimeter. But with that, social networks are breaking that perimeter down, and we're dealing with people. So it's not about protecting the perimeter now, it's about protecting that data. And it's one thing if that data is residing on a corporate server deep within a physically protected and multiple firewall protected data center. But when that data is moving around with an individual user, how do you protect that? And that is why it's changing the dynamics from infrastructure to specifically data protection. We're seeing DLP, data loss prevention tools, becoming the new firewall, for the social web, because a lot of this is information-based, and if organizations don't have tools to protect that sensitive information, they will find it, quickly, going out of their perimeter. There's significant and legitimate risk with allowing uncontrolled access to social networking sites. We'll see later organizations need to understand how they're going to deal with social networks. Many of these risks can be mitigated by a comprehensive security strategy, but such a strategy requires organizations to understand those risks and to create pragmatic solutions to that. Part of the issue is that social networks are built around security and trust. They require a complete taxonomy of security solutions. You just can't throw out a DLP appliance out there and expect it to work. Trust is a major factor because people are very trusting on social networks. If you've done any sort of testing around social networks, people are often quite open. They will share significant amounts of personal data, significant amounts of business data with folks they perceive to be legitimate. And if you remember the cartoon from the New Yorker, that no one knows you're a dog on the internet, social media puts that cartoon on steroids, and it's extremely easy to create a bogus presence out there, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook, and people will get an invitation from a friend they think is legitimate, when in reality it's not. And people will start sharing with them, and in a short amount of time, you can have significant data breaches. One of the issues is that there's no going back once something is posted on a social networking site. Physics 101, there's what's called the law of conservation of energy. Energy can't be destroyed. It could only change form. And what does that have to deal with social networks? Is that once you post something on a social networking site, once it's out there, you can never know with assurance that it can be that can be removed. If something is confidential and it's made public, there is no way you could ever make that confidential again, because if it's breached, then it's no longer confidential. The longer the information is out there, the more difficult it is to even remove from the net. We've got syndication, RSS feeds, and once that data is pushed out, often within seconds, tens of thousands, if not millions of users are getting that feed. And if information was accidentally or maliciously sent out, there's no way you can undelete that or request that to be sent back. Ultimately, as data is propagated out there, users who want to completely delete their presence for whatever reason will find it extremely, extremely difficult. If a person's had, for example, a presence on Facebook for a while, even if they delete that account, there is no way they could remove all of the postings, all of their photos, everything they shared. So with that, it makes it, it's something that people and organizations need to tread lightly before they put something on a social networking site. Aggregation is a significant security issue. There's a thing called salami attack. If you saw Office Space, in the movie, they created a scheme to create 1 cent from numerous accounts. So 1 cent from numerous accounts, from a single account, no one's going to notice. When you get millions of accounts out there, it adds up to a lot of money. So too, from a social networking perspective, we'll see that if we could take a little bit of information from a lot of people, we can get a significant amount of information about a person, about an organization, about a product. Google's got an initiative called Open Social. It's got a common API. So we're seeing people who've got a presence on multiple social network sites. It's possible to aggregate a lot of that data. And this is extremely powerful. It's extremely beneficial for organizations that want to push a lot of information out there and want their listeners, want their readers, want their clients to be able to see that, to view it, to read it. The downside is that if information is accidentally sent out in an aggregated environment, unaggregating that is completely impossible. Ultimately, long-term anonymity becomes extremely difficult because over time, if you take all these traces, links, various bits of information out there with aggregation, over time, significant amounts of that information can be correlated, aggregated, which makes anonymity and privacy, quite difficult in the realm of social networks. We could spend an hour on this slide alone. Can't go into detail about everything, but there are security and privacy risks out there. Organizations need to understand that, to deal with that. Malware is a big deal. Social networks are being used as a distribution point for malware. There's a lot of vulnerabilities out there. If you're accessing a Facebook application, it's only as secure as the application developer. Vulnerabilities, both malicious, accidental. Corporate espionage is the Achilles heel of social networking. Phishing and spear phishing, we're seeing very targeted attacks against people. Organizations, the folks from Nigeria will send out 1 million emails. But what about spear phishing, when you want to target a very specific person? Often those are very difficult for the intended target to know that they are a victim out there. Bandwidth consumption, social networks can eat up a corporate network. Information leaking out. Social networking is the bane of social networks. And even something new with CBIR, content-based image retrieval. A lot of Facebook is about people sharing photos, sharing videos. And one picture is indeed worth 1,000 words. And CBIR is a fascinating technology. It could look at that picture, find unique fingerprints, as it were, and it could tell us, where is this picture? Where is it taken from? So if you see this picture from a hotel room, someone maybe a person says, hey, on vacation, posted it. With CBIR, we could take that picture and be able to determine, where is that person? There's at least, 10 good indicators which make this picture unique. And we can tell, what type of hotel it is, where in the world it is, perhaps what city it is. And if you've got a number of photos, one is able to aggregate that and get a lot of information out there. Once again, it's not to say don't post your photos on Facebook or any other social media, but with anything, there is a risk out there. And depending what the photo is, do that accordingly. So let's take a scenario. And this scenario is called what Mission Possible 1999 is Social Networking 2009. 1999 was not that long ago, but a lot has changed. So here's your mission. Find 20 divorced or single female design engineers in the U.S. at Boeing Integrated Defense System. Build a rapport with them. Why? Because you want critical data and design for new fighter and development. This is a risk Boeing knows they're facing. They're spending tens of billions of dollars on R&D. And they know they have a lot of competitors out there, and they know that they are targets for business espionage. This is a risk. Boeing, Airbus, Grumman, all of every organization faces. Any organization that has a large investment in R&D is going to have a similar scenario. This takes time, budget, and what are your success factors? So in 1999, if you wanted to do a business intelligence attack like that, you need a lot of people. You have to deploy them in the ground. They're going to need departments. They're going to need hotels. It's going to take a number of months. At the end, you may have limited success and at any point, extremely, extremely expensive. 2009, this could be done by one person. All you have to do is create multiple Facebook accounts. You could outsource this to a third world country where people will charge you $10 a day. Facebook is near immediate results, and you have an extremely, extremely high success rate. Ultimately, what does this tell you? Facebook makes it easy to find out who these people are, who their friends are, likely folks similar to them, other employees at Boeing, what they like, where they shop, what they do, and you've got all this information. You can use that to launch an attack. And this type of scenario is something that organizations like Boeing, like any pharmaceutical, any manufacturing company, face every day, and they understood how to deal with this in the past. But if you take that approach from 1999 and use it in 2099, it will fail, and the results will be devastating. So, not that to scare everyone out there. There are a lot of risks out there, but social networks and security can indeed be compatible. It requires effort, it requires staff, you need a plan of action. There's no pixie dust social network security appliances that you can deploy and all the risks will go away. Public corporations need to be specifically sensitive to this because those that are under SEC disclosure obligations need to deal with fair disclosure rules. And if your employees are sharing information that they shouldn't be, you can have an SEC issue out there. And so those type of organizations need to have an infrastructure in place, logging and archiving, if indeed they are going to use social networks. So now that we know what the issues are, what the risks are, let's now go into some ways that businesses can deal with it. So first off, organizations need to get in front of this social network wave. You have to be proactive. You need to have a dedicated team to deal with the specific risks of social networks. Organizations often, when it came to security, they throw everything to their local sysadmin because the guy knows open source, he knows Red Hat, so therefore he must be a great security guy. That's not going to work within social networks. They need to be able to understand the risks, issues out there. You have to be involved and engaging with a lot of different entities with the organization. One of the challenges is that social networks is dynamic. It's moving extremely fast. So an organization, if they create a solution, you have to be flexible enough to understand is that strategy, those policies we create today might be obsolete in 6 months. And this is a problem every organization, this is a problem every entity is facing. A risk assessment is in order. For each social network community, you may allow, as a corporate entity, understand what are the risks there. The risks of Twitter are different from the risks of MySpace. The risks of Facebook are different from the risks of LinkedIn. Each side has its own risks, vulnerabilities. You have to understand that. You need to deal with that. Create user scenarios. Certain users are going to create greater risk to the organization. You need to collect all that information, correlate that information, and put that, crunch those numbers, and that ultimately is going to map into your policy and strategy. And once again, it has to be customized to your specific risk matrix. Ultimately, security and usability is a balance. As an organization, you have to determine what that balance is. Here's two organizations. The U.S. Marines have totally prohibited all aspects of social networking. Starbucks has completely embraced social networking. Both these organizations have taken the right approach. One's completely prohibited it. We could pretty much understand why the Marines would do that. Starbucks has totally embraced it. We completely understand why Starbucks did that. And once again, even though they're opposite reactions, they're both the right reactions because the organizations have looked at those risks, looked at the benefits. The Marines have said there's tremendous benefits, but the risks are too great. Starbucks said, hey, the benefits are tremendous and we can't deal with the risks. And that's why it's an imperative to focus it to your specific matrix, your specific needs. And once you understand that, once you have enough input, then you can make the right decision. You need a strategy. You need a go-to document. Once again, I can reiterate, it has to be based on your social media goals. Your goals are different from your competition. Take into account laws, rules. You need to identify people in your organization who will be the online public face of the firm. Start dealing with employees. How do they identify themselves? Do you want all your employees identifying themselves in a social media setting as representatives of yours? You need to train your users. Involve risk managers into your planning. In some organizations, legal counsel may say, hey, this is far too great a risk for us, and they won't approve it. Others will say, hey, we can't deal with the risk. Let's run with it. You need to start looking at monitoring tools. As people go onto social media sites, they're putting data out there. If you're not careful, the data that goes out can be your intellectual property. And if it goes out there and it's not monitored, it's not controlled, you can quickly lose any legal rights you may have had to that information. So monitoring is crucial in a social networking setting. You need to control how it's done, how it's going out, and as I said earlier, that's why a lot of these DLT tools are finding a resurgence within social networks. Perform an assessment. See what your employees are doing, what they're doing out there, how much information is already out there. Perform a LinkedIn analysis of a sampling of 100 of your employees, and if you do that, you could see a lot from LinkedIn. As I said earlier, there's a lot of aggregation and correlation, and with that, you could see, what technology is the company using. You look at the profiles of the various system administrators, whether it's legal, management, marketing. You could get a lot of things out there. You could see a corporate direction where the company is. You could see who their vendors are, who their partners are. You could see, their internal email address and addressing formats. So with that, there's a lot of information that can be gleaned. Is that appropriate for an organization? It's a proverbial, it depends. So you need to focus on that. Perform a Facebook analysis of what your employees are doing. Facebook, what you can tell is pretty much, everything. If you have enough users out there, just the amount of information, if not controlled, and if users are not contained and educated, is just there's no other word for it than astounding of how much information is out there and how it's easily out there and easily available. It's important to define what your policy is and what your strategy is. And the challenge is that social networks are really blurring these boundaries. Employees are walking out of your facility and they're going home, and in essence they're an extension of who the company is. People may see a system administrator for Fortune 500 company X and say, hey, this person is speaking for the company. So you need to define how they're doing that and understand if they're doing that. It's important that this be a management decision. It shouldn't be an IT decision. Management needs to really understand how they want to deal with social networks. There's a lot of different strategies: block, contain, disregard, embrace. Blocking is someone like the Marines says we completely do not allow it. Contain it. Pragmatic organization like many organizations says we'll limit it. Disregard it is an organization that hopes it go away. They're putting their head in the sand. They're shooting themselves in the foot. Embracing is an organization like Starbucks, which has seen the benefits and is running with it. You want to create user scenarios. There's a lot of different users. There's management. There's end users. Understand what they will be posting. Ensure the strategy is realistic. A lot of strategies are too low level, too high level. It doesn't fit for the culture. And it's a fine line and a fine balance on how to do this. There's a great webinar by Joshua Ross. You can go to this link, and he has a whole webinar on defining a social media strategy, and that's extremely, extremely beneficial. Having a policy is a must. Even if you completely want to prohibit everything like the Marines, have a policy to define that. You need it because your employees, unfortunately, will do stupid things. They'll share information that they shouldn't be. This policy has to be rational, sensible. Cover all aspects of social media, photography, video. You want to train your folks who are on social media, who are posting. Even if you've got public information out there, some of your clients, some of your customers may not want your people referencing that. So to make sure you've got a deep understanding with clients, customers, and partners on what can and what cannot be posted about them. Data classification is a topic that scares a lot of people. They often think of a military where it's completely embedded, extremely difficult. You don't have to take as deep and pervasive approach to data classification like the military, but your folks and your end users need to know, what is confidential, what is private, what is public. And if they don't know, these classification levels. If they don't know the various levels of what they can and can't share, ultimately they will share information that they shouldn't be. Security awareness has always been important, has always been crucial to information security. In the realm of social media, it's even more important. It has to be communicated. It has to be customized. There's a lot of good stuff out there which you can easily and quickly, download off the net. It'll get you about 50% of the way there, but you really need to customize that, disseminate it to everyone in the organization. You need recurrent training. As I said earlier, social media is dynamic. It's changing. Create a topic taboo list. There's certain topics people shouldn't be discussing, whatever is relevant for your organization. Let them know expectations of privacy. If they're doing things within the corporate network, most organizations say there's zero expectation of privacy. You link it to other training, business ethics, standards of contact, and security awareness is extremely important for public companies. Given the SEC disclosure laws, if your people are disclosing things they shouldn't be, the last thing you want is to be part of an SEC investigation. And ultimately, even if you're found not at fault, just the assertion of an insider disclosure, extremely expensive. It can be embarrassing and it's time-consuming. The last thing you as an organization want is having to disclose to your shareholders that you're under SEC investigation. And even if you're found not at fault, this can easily cost hundreds of thousands of dollars if you deal with the lost time and the legal fees involved. And all of that could have easily been mitigated with a good security awareness program. The guidelines are incredibly important. If your employees don't have clear guidelines, it's just a matter of time until they start sharing things they shouldn't be sharing. There's a lot of good resources out there. Two extremely valuable guidelines. Here's the links for Intel and IBM. You could go to the site, and they detail, in a number of pages how employees should use blogs, wikis, social networks, how they engage clients, how they engage customers. And this is, if you read these guidelines, you can see that Intel and IBM have completely embraced social networking. They understand the risks. They understand the benefits. And they want their employees to use it, but they also want their employees to use it in the right way to ensure that they get all the benefits and mitigate those risks. And if you read these guidelines, you can see, hey, these are two organizations, that really understand what they're doing, and they have taken the time to do it right. Use these guidelines, and there's a lot of them out there. I just found these two to be extremely well-written and quite effective. Just to reiterate, regulatory is an area you have to consider. Part of it is that social networks create tons of scenarios that they didn't foresee just a number of years ago. Understand what regulatory frameworks are you under. If you're HIPAA, if you're under the new high-tech breach response is a major issue. So if you're an insurance company, if you're a healthcare facility, if you're under the rubric of HIPAA in any way, you really need to take social networking strategy quite seriously. And just to reiterate, if you're a public company, it's imperative you have a strategy and you have training, because if the SEC gets on your back, that is literally the last thing you want. The European Union is extremely serious about end-user privacy. If you have any type of presence in one of the EU countries, tread slowly and deal with the risks. There's a lot out there. A lot of things we do on a day-to-day basis in the United States, you simply cannot do in the EU. Blanket monitoring and logging, for example, is unacceptable. Any sysadmin in the United States is going to run Ethereal, Wireshark. In the EU, you almost need a court order to do that. So if you got an EU presence, you really need to take these seriously. And this has a great position paper. This is available on the network from their website, Security Issues and Recommendations for Online Social Networks. required reading for anyone who has an EU presence, and it's also got a lot of great information out there, even if you're not part of the European community. HR, has to be involved. Social networks open up a huge can of worms. How do you discipline people? Can your HR people look at people's Facebook pages? Can you fire people? You need to start dealing with that. A lot of people within HR will just say, hey, let's completely prohibit it. You can't do that. You want to find that balance. If you're too heavy-handed, that can backfire, and you'll have low morale. But HR needs to be involved in this process. And finally, there's this new thing we call reputation management. Imagine someone does a search on the Verizon store. You want to buy a cell phone. You look for Verizon, and you start looking. Then you see, here's a woman dragging a kid through a Verizon store. Once again, this is a few weeks ago. Nearly 500,000 people have seen that. If you're Verizon, how do you deal with this issue? Part of social media is to build and protect and have a positive reputation. Often that can be quite difficult. There's a guy whose guitar was broken, the United Airlines. He posted a cute, humorous video about that. He thought 10,000, 20,000 people might see that. Over 5 million people have seen that. How is United going to deal with that? His guitar, which was broken, he sent to Taylor Guitars. So Taylor Guitars, responded to that. And, they have over 130,000 people viewing that. So there's a tremendous power out there. But if you're on the negative side of any type of social media, you really need to understand those risks. So that's why a lot of organizations are putting those reputation management groups into play. So that's pretty much it from a corporate perspective. So now, what can individuals do? First off, be careful out there. Social networks can be fun, they can be entertaining, but there is a dark side to them. You can lose your job, you can embarrass yourself, you can, it's been the cause of a lot of bad things. People have lost their job, they've disclosed things, and as you can see from the earlier part, they've used it in ways they really should not have. As an individual user, first off, curb your enthusiasm. If you're new to social networks, often people will jump into Facebook and try to reconnect with every relative, from their high school classmates, and spend hours upon hours getting involved. Be in control. If especially folks which have addictive personalities really need to be careful. What's fun today is embarrassing tomorrow. Set daily limits. An hour a day on social networks. And as I'll say a few times in this section, don't post anything that you don't want the entire world to see. Because once you post it, there's very little controls out there. When you're at work, realize, you've got a day job. Unless you're one of the few people who are the social media spokesman for your company, likely, you should be focusing what you're paid to do, and you don't want to abuse the trust that your employer had in you. As you can see, the syringe at the bottom, Facebook can be addictive. If you choose to spend hours a day, make sure you're doing it not during work hours and on weekends. It's quite easy to incriminate yourself. Everything can be used against you. Once again, not to scare you, but don't think just because you posted something, you've got a few friends out there that it can't break out and the whole world cannot see it. Be judicious. Photos, videos, you need to know what copyright issues are. You need to know what your corporate regulations are. If you look at a lot of new camcorders, they have direct upload to YouTube capabilities. So with that, don't be in a photo that you don't want the world to see. If you're in a video, understand that the whole world can see that. There's thousands of incidents where people have posted videos on YouTube and expect only their friends and relatives to see that. In the end, tens, hundreds of thousands of people see that. There's even things. Recently, I know someone who took a video of her husband, in bed, in his in a t-shirt, in shorts, a little unkept, not a big deal. She posted it. About 6 weeks later, she was able to have it removed from YouTube. By that time, 20,000 people had seen it. So with that, Don't be in any video or photo that you don't really want the world to see. Even an innocuous image can give out a lot of information about the people, whether it's metadata. Even though Facebook leaves a lot to be desired from a security perspective, there are all the things you can do. If you go to this link, there's a lot of good settings you can. Just assume there's no security on social networks. Assume zero privacy, assume zero confidentiality, and you'll be fine. Yeah, there are things out there, but once you're on Facebook, you basically have zero privacy. Understand your employer's social media guidelines. You post something corporate, make sure it's public information. Even if it's public, maybe you shouldn't be posting that out there. Insider information can cost you your job. As I said, Facebook is viral and addictive, so you don't want to waste your workday on that. A lot of these things are common sense. Bad social networking can lead to career suicide, as you saw from those headlines earlier. Realize that HR is looking. Your current employer is looking. If you're looking, if you're looking for a new job, employers will look at your social network presence. So deal with that. There is this inherent tension on some ways you want to share, but you have to be careful of the risks. Ultimately, it's like a party. Have fun. Just don't humiliate yourself. You don't want to be with that person that embarrasses themselves at the party with a lampshade on their head. A lot of this is Security 101. Choose good passwords, not easy to guess. There's a lot of good password creation rules out there. And also, if you've got numerous social networking sites to use, don't use the same password across multiple social network sites. You don't have to accept every Facebook invitation. Everyone is a target for social engineers. Even if you're, quote-unquote, a low-level employee in an organization, people may want that salami. You have a lot of little bits of information about your organization, and those who are targeting social networking attacks will try to get that bit of information from you and from your coworker and from another coworker, and over time can get a lot of information. So even if someone's asking you some innocuous thing, be careful. What does your friends list say about you? People will be looking at that. They will make judgments. As I said earlier, something you post today, a YouTube video you appear in, any video you appear in can haunt you for the rest of your life. So deal with that. Trust but verify. You don't have to accept every invitation out there, and limit the amount of personal information you post. Get into the habit of not sharing your information. Do you need to post your birthday? Think about it, because those little bits of information can be used in a identity theft attack against you. Surveys. Be careful taking them on Facebook. There's thousands of them out there that can be done maliciously to get information from you. Once again, it can be aggregated. It can be used for password recovery answers. And ultimately, you realize, you don't have to, comment on everything you see, and be especially judicious on comments about, job interviews you've been on, any type of complaints about long, boring meetings. Your manager, HR will see that, people will see that, your clients will see that, and it can have a significantly negative impact on you and on your job. Think about any type of complaints against coworkers, management, bosses, etc. Need I say more? And those, silly off-the-cuff remarks you make with coworkers at the lunch table can have a devastating effect in a social media setting. We'll close up here with issues around children. If you've got kids, if you have friends who have kids, if you've got relatives who are kids, teach them about the risks of social networks. Kids are going to misrepresent themselves to join sites that have so-called age restrictions. Kids don't understand the risks out there, and they will post far too much information out there, their hobbies, their interests. Teach them basic internet security. You should have monitoring for them. Make sure that they're appropriate sites. Even with all the filters now, with all the tools out there, it's parents who need to ensure that their kids are safe and responsible users. And as you can see from this news story from last week, teen set self on fire to imitate YouTube clip. Not every teen is going to do that, but that should tell you the maturity level about a lot of teens out there. They don't understand privacy. Most of them don't understand risk. They don't understand those dangers. So they will do silly things like that. They will set themselves on fire. They will tell strangers that their parents are away on vacation, where their parents bank, where their parents work, who their parents' friends are, who their psychologists, what drugs are on. And it's just astounding how much they will share. If you look at the National Cybersecurity Alert System, they've got a paper on that, TIP ST05-002. There's a URL for that. So it's got a lot of good information out there on how to deal with kids on their presence. So we covered a lot out there. Ultimately, it comes down to is that social networks do introduce significant security risks. Organizations can't take a blind eye to that. They need to understand those risks and take a very pragmatic, formal approach to deal with them. At the individual level, individuals can't be naive about their responsibilities, about the fact that they're going to be a target for attack. But with all of that, social networks and security are not an oxymoron. They can work together, but only as long as at an organizational level, the social network security is part of a company's comprehensive information security program, and that end users and individuals are aware of the risks and their individual responsibility. And if you put the two together, you can mitigate those risks and get significant benefits that social networks offer. As for me, here's my contact information. I've got a presence on LinkedIn. I've got a presence on Twitter. I invite you to connect with me that way. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. Here's my contact information. And we have about the next 10 minutes to answer any questions, clarify anything if you have them. And you can direct them via Catherine.
Okay, yes. Just post them in the chat room if you would. Actually, the attendees have been really great, posting a lot of information in there. And Ben, that was a great presentation. I think probably a lot of us here are more knowledgeable about this than the general public, but you really covered a lot of stuff. Give us food for thought, and thank you for doing that. So here's the question. It's about universities, and Ed asked it, how can universities best handle protecting their intellectual property and the privacy of their students and faculty with an increasing number of teaching, research, and other activities taking place on third-party online services off campus? Non-campus.
That's a good question. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry, if you use them as a guide, they've got a pretty good handle on collaboration. If you look, there's a lot of pharmaceuticals out there who are spending billions of dollars on proprietary drug research, so they want to keep that information extremely confidential. On the other side, they've got numerous business partners, numerous contractors, a lot of co-researchers, and often universities that they're dealing with. So they created a strategy to share that information. It's about segmenting that data, identifying, having good access control in place, excellent authentication, excellent logging, and ultimately any organization that has an effective information security program, a formalized security program, any new risks, any new regulation, any new threat will be relatively easy to deal with. So a lot of the bigger universities, which have collaborative environments, they've done a lot of that. So you can reach out to them rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. Because I said security is ultimately a balance, and especially the university setting where you want to encourage collaboration and encourage interaction. You want to do that, but limit it. And universities have a unique sets of risks. One of the issues they've been dealing with is with file sharing. In the past, universities have been where everyone went to download songs and videos. Once the RA get involved and started suing them, they created a program. But you can't, if you're in a university, by and large, your IT department should have an infrastructure in place where they're already dealing with that, and you can leverage, use them to leverage that rather than reinvent the wheel.
Good. So Clarinet is asking, should like to hear you explain more about how information on the web lives forever, even after it's been deleted.
Yeah. Is that all? I will post a document. I'll make something available on LinkedIn. I'll make it available on any social media site. So I'm pushing that out there. And you've got people downloading those documents, downloading those videos, downloading those, any type of media out there. So once it's pushed out, and the longer it's out there, and the more people have accessed it, it's impossible to to undelete that and bring it back. There's even a what they call the Streisand Effect. Is a number of years ago, Barbara Streisand sued, I believe it was a photo, and her very lawsuit propagated the sharing of that very image she was trying to share. But the larger your online presence, the larger your friends and your community is. When you're pushing that out there, how do you get it back? And you can't. Is that, as I said, is if you've got 500,000 followers and you push a picture out there that you shouldn't, how do you get that back? Because they can download it, they could put it on their storage device, and there's no way to bring that back. And the longer the media is out there, and the larger the user base, the more difficult it is. And once it has been breached, there's no way to undo that. There is even the courts have acknowledged it. There was that tragic case of the girl who crashed her father's Porsche, and a California Highway Patrol officer took two pictures from his phone. Ultimately, those pictures propagated, and the courts have stated is that ultimately people are powerless to bring that back, and that just the fact of that some people don't want that image, that document, that video to be seen will create that Streisand effect. But it's uncontrolled. We're seeing one of the problems the movie industry faced is that in the past when they sent movies out for folks to review during Academy Award season, they would take those movies and resell them, and they would put them on file sharing. So what they did is they used some tools out there for digital watermarking. The Academy can't do that because they only send that out to a few thousand controlled recipients. But when you're on Facebook, when you're on MySpace, or on Twitter, when you're on any social media site, you have pretty much zero control. So unlike the Academy that has control on the distribution, you really have zero control. So that's why it's really ultimately impossible to bring something back.
Okay. Here's a question. I'm not really sure I understand what Jim is asking, but he said, what advice do you have for companies who have staff with IP concerns for shared ideas, for example, in relation to product feedback?
One thing is it's that balance, that fine line. Is you want input, but once you're in essence, it's almost no different from a pharmaceutical company or an R&D organization that has proprietary designs, that has things under development. Look at Boeing with their 787. They've got thousands of people that need to look at these designs, but they've created a very secure infrastructure to do that. Very few organizations have the security risks that Boeing has, so they will not make as comprehensive a security framework. But you can take the basic idea, put a lot of controls in place, look at monitoring, control, use access control, and use the very fundamental security tools out there, access control, authentication, logging, so you can't see, who accessed it, when they accessed it, why they accessed it. As I said, social media is not really the risks aren't, aren't security risks we didn't face, 10 years ago. They're the same risks, but they're just a lot more pervasive, done by, hundreds of millions of users.
Okay, great. And then I think we're just about out of time, but how about this one question? Someone is asking, what is your favorite attack against a social media network? Or what's your favorite social media attack?
My often the easiest attack is, just ask for the information. Many times people try to think of very exotic, very sophisticated ways to do that. I'm not going to. There's some funky things I know about. Might not be, full disclosure might not be the best media for it. But a lot of people, if you just ask them for things, they will give it to you because they're just unaware of the risks out there. They will, in the physical world, they'll hold the door open for you. In the social media world, if you ask them kindly and nicely, and over time you ask them for the information, they'll give it to you, and often they'll give you a whole lot more. And that is an exploit. Social media brings out the best in people. It's wonderful, but it has that dark side, and you need to understand that and deal with that. That's
true. That is a great point, especially what you talked about with surveys and just posting personal information. Everyone is saying outstanding job, and I agree with them. Great presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic. It's a topic that every organization needs to deal with. This is not something that a few companies are facing. Social media is every organization. The Fortune 20,000. It's a real threat for everyone, and the security. 10 years ago there was the FUD factor of creating fear, uncertainty, doubt about things that are never going to come to fruition. Social media is awesome, but the risks are tremendous, and they're real, and they're happening as we speak.
All right. Well, we're about out of time, so I just want to thank you again, Ben, and I want to thank everyone who joined us today, especially for everyone posting the great information in the chat room. We love it when you do that. Now, if you want to save a copy of the chat file, the best way to do that, and you should do it right now because people complain that I don't give them enough time, but you should do it now, is select all or copy everything in the chat room and post it into a text file. And if for some reason you can't get that, just email me at webcast@o'reilly.com, and I'll send you a copy of the file. That's no problem. And we will have the entire recording available in just a couple days, and I'll send everyone a link to that as soon as it's ready. So, yes, and it's going to live out there permanently forever. Yeah. So, but I think there's nothing to be embarrassed about here. Although, Ben, you didn't give us your Facebook page.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a Facebook presence, so.
I didn't think you did.
Okay.
All right. Okay, everyone. So I'm going to close this out now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.